So this month with the Girly Book Club, we have been indulging in the magic of Lily and the Octopus, a story that is ultimately about grief, loss, letting go. But it's also, got a lot of humor and playfulness to it, which made this book a delight to consume. It expresses purely what it's like and what it means to love a dog. And the story is emotionally authentic and truly beautiful. Personally, when reading Lily and the Octopus, I chuckled, I laughed out loud, I cried, and then I full-on sobbed both times that I read it. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Steven Rowley, author of our featured book of the month, Lily and the Octopus. Welcome, Steven, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Hi, it's my pleasure. Thank you, and thank you all the members of the Girly Book Club around the world who have been embracing this book and reaching out to me and posting online about it. It has been a really exciting month to be a part of this.
That's amazing. Can you give us a brief synopsis of your novel for anyone who has not read it or is just tuning in, and tell us a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah, Lily and the Octopus is a story of friendship between Ted, a human man, and Lily, his aging dachshund, who he's had since she was a and the book opens with one of their usual evenings together where he looks down and he sees what he describes as an octopus on top of her head, as if it were a birthday party hat or something, but I always imagine two tentacles sort of tied under her chin. And then it's sort of what he decides to do about that, and how he comes to grips with perhaps that it might be time soon to this relationship, and what that will mean to him as he's stuck in his life, and how he sort of needs to set a path moving forward.
Great. Before we fully dive into the story within the novel, I want to first discuss about how Lily and the Octopus came to be. I understand that it started out as a short story first. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. It had a very unusual path to publication. It did sort of start out as a short story, which is very similar to what the opening chapter is in this, in the final version, the way it was published. And after that, I did sort of proud of myself for having written a story, because I'd been stuck in my writing for a while. I'm a sort of screenwriter by trade, and it's very frustrating screenwriting, because for the writer anyway, because you're always waiting for other people to say yes. So you're waiting for a financier or a producer or a director or a right actor to sign on, and oftentimes those people all come with different layers and opinions and notes and things, and oftentimes the final product doesn't really resemble what you started out to say. So I had been feeling sort of stuck in my writing for a while, and I just sort of had something that sounded authentically me. And so I sat down to write this short story, and I shared it with someone a man I had just started dating at the time, and he said, "That's fantastic. This is what you should be writing, but now go write chapter 2." And I thought, wait a minute, chapter 2? No, this is it. It's done. If I wrote chapter 2, I wasn't sure what would come after that. Chapter 3, I suppose, or 4, 5, and 6. And I didn't have the vision for it as a whole book, but because men sometimes are dumb and they like to impress, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to write chapter 2. I did, and from there I didn't stop. So it really was an exercise kind of in terror, I would like to say. I've written 2 manuscripts before this that never went anywhere, that are now sort of like heavy doorstops, or they're sitting on a bookshelf somewhere, and never will see the light of day, for anyone who's thinking of asking. But it was kind of a terrifying process. But I wrote every day for 100 days. Once I had come up with the idea of the octopus, it was a gift in many ways. I sort of imagined the octopus giving me ink to tell the story. And I was terrified that if I stopped even for a day, that ink would dry up. After 100 days, which is incredibly quick to write a novel, I had a first draft, and then it goes through a year of revisions. But it came together sort of very magically. I did have a dog named Lily who had recently passed at the time, so I was working through some grief in my own life about that and about several other things. People always want to know if I'm Ted, and I sort of like the very last thing that happened was Ted had a name. He didn't have a name always when I wrote the book, and Simon & Schuster, who acquired it for publication, asked me, really pushed me to name the character. I think it's difficult to write jacket copy or advertising copy saying a man and his dog as a name. But he's somewhere in the sort of ether between me and not me.
Great.
When I finished the book, I was proud of it as a piece of writing, but I tried to find a publishing agent to take this project on. And if you call people and say, would you like to read my book about a dog and an octopus, you can literally hear on the other end of the line. And coming from Hollywood as I do, my instinct was to try to describe it another way. At one point, I described it as a cross between Joan Didion's Year of Manning and Moby Dick. That didn't get me an agent either. So I was determined to get this out there. So I was very close to self-publishing it. And in doing so, I hired a freelance editor who pretty quickly told me, no, you should not self-publish this. And in fact, she had a friend who worked at Simon & Schuster who she thought might respond to the story as strongly as she had, and got the ball rolling.
Yeah, so you hired on this freelance editor, right, who pitched the novel to a former colleague at Simon & Schuster, and then the book was forwarded into the hands of the editor-in-chief of Simon & Schuster, correct? And then within, what was it, 48 hours? Pardon me?
Yeah, it happened quickly. I think the editor at Simon & Schuster's book submitted the book on a Friday, and the freelance editor who I worked with said, we'll give her 3 months maybe to read it, depending on what's on her desk. It will take her that long to get back to you. And I thought, well, in 3 months, I was going full steam ahead with self-publishing this. So I said, I thought I'd have it for sale on Amazon, in 3 months. But that was on a Friday, and on Monday morning, because of the time difference between New York and Los Angeles, I woke up to my phone ringing, and it was Simon & Schuster saying they wanted to publish the book.
That amazing.
Doesn't happen.
Yes, from what I understand. I mean, it's all very quick. The fact that you wrote the novel in 100 days, and the fact that, within 48 hours of it being in their hands, they were making you an offer. What was that experience like? Things don't move at that pace normally. Was that a whirlwind for you?
It was an incredible one. Now, I don't want to over dramatize it. It took me a year and a half between finishing writing it, trying to find an agent and all, a year and a half just to get it in the door, and then it moved quickly from there. But it was such, it was so magical that I couldn't help but think a little someone up there pulling the strings. I think of Lily sort of orchestrating the magic from wherever she is now. But yeah, it's from there. It was a whirlwind, and I was able to get an agent. If there are any aspiring writers out there, if you can find an offer for patient, then you can choose your agent. They will take your calls then. But it was really backwards the way this happened, and the whole thing has just been an extraordinary experience.
That's amazing. So there's been a lot of chat between our members regarding your book, and one thing that kept coming up recently that members want to know is how much of this story is from your real life?
Well, I would say, I'm not going to put a percentage on it. There are things that are true. There are things that are true. And the book is very spare. It's very stripped down. And part of that was to elevate the relationship between Lily. I wanted to strip out as many of the other characters as I could. So Ted has one parent and one sibling and one friend and one therapist, and that's about it. In real life, I have parents who are divorced and remarried, and I'm one of 4 kids who are each married, and so I feel like I have a huge family, and they're all like, "Wait, how come? Where am I? How come I'm not in this?" And I'm blessed to have many friends who helped me through dealing with the loss when Lily passed away, and probably should have many therapists, although I don't. So it's a sort of spare version of my life. I would say the sort of emotion behind the story is pretty true, but the actual events and things that happen aren't necessarily the truth. And pretty much anything with Lily, with the dog, happened. She did a tree. She did, the things from our relationship are true. No, I didn't actually play Monopoly with the dog, or no, I didn't. There was never a point, although Lily did have a brain tumor, there was never a point I actually thought it was an octopus. That came to me when I thought about the story and to talk about attachment and how difficult it is to let go, and something about having a metaphor with actual tentacles seemed to, I don't know, it made sense in my head.
That's great. That you just led right into my next question, talking about the octopus. And we quickly come to understand as readers that the octopus in the story is merely a euphemism for Lily's tumor. So I was going to ask, why an octopus specifically?
Yeah, I think I wish I could remember the exact moment that the octopus came, because it's kind of changed my life. So looking back, I wish I could, but it really was just sort of thinking about a literary way to talk about these things. There have been books like Marley and Me, and there's other dog things sort of straight down the line. And as a creative writer, I was just looking for a way to explore emotion, and not necessarily this happened and this happened and this happened, but the way that grief happens. And I was very fascinated with the way that our minds sometimes can build these elaborate constructs to protect us from having to deal with what we're maybe not quite ready to deal with. And in Ted's case, the octopus is sort of an extreme example, going far down one road, but I became very interested in seeing how far he would retreat into his own mind to avoid having to deal with one of him, and then what that would feel like when he came out of that.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. It's such a great story. And I think for me, part of it is that you capture the familiar beauty of, I'll say, dog companionship versus ownership. But in Ted's list of nicknames for Lily's, to the experience of sharing ice cream with her, Ted's guilt in hurting her accidentally, or for example, when he's short and tugs the leash too hard and makes Lily yelp. I found these such relatable stories within Lily and the Octopus that really drew me in even closer as someone who has a dog. Did you expect that other people would relate so closely to this story, both in the case of grieving a lost pet, but also just in pet companionship?
No, well, in terms of grief, that's the thing about grief, is you feel very alone when you're going through it. And of course, that's not true. So many of us have been there, and we understand. But when you're in the thick of it, it does feel very isolating and very much like you're the only one who's ever had these feelings. So yes, when I was writing it initially, in the way I probably started writing this about 6 months after the actual Lily passed away. So it was still pretty raw, and it was a good time for me to work on that, because it allowed me to, where the emotions hadn't softened, they hadn't slipped from my mind or faded away. So I'm grateful that I wrote it when I did. When the book was published, yes, I was still very surprised, because I still thought, there's still a part of me that says, I wrote a book on this, people are going to think I'm nuts. And so the fact that so many people have embraced the book the way it has taught me a really valuable lesson, which is that we're all weird, in a delightful way. Your weirdness may not be my weirdness. You may not see an octopus. Okay. But as long as I can be as honest and specific as possible about this weirdness, that people are going to get it, because they see something in a different way. And I've had people come up to me and say, oh, well, I had something similar with my dog. We called it the golf ball, or we called it, a different animal. People have interesting ways of coping, and they get it. And that's been very moving to realize how the loss is. And I've been so moved by people who not just have pet loss that have latched onto this book, but loss is loss, and the grieving is similar. Not to compare the loss of a parent, but the process is similar. So I've been very moved. Now it's a little weird, because I go out on events and people will come up to me. Sometimes at the beginning, sometimes I thought, oh God, I'm gonna have to take a Klonopin before I go out in public, because people will come up with me and want to tell me their stories of their loss, which is I'm happy to listen, but sometimes it's a lot. And but it's still interesting when I go out now and people come to me and they've just finished the book, or they're dealing with something very fresh, and they'll break down in tears and look up at me and think like, why aren't you crying with me? And I sort of feel like with Lily, I'm a little cried out. That was 5 years ago now, and this book has really helped me process and work through all that. So I'm like, well, I'm okay now, but let me stand here and let's hug for you.
Well, you're a trooper for making it through that, for sure. And that's one thing I notice in reading the book is I look at my dog and I just, last night going to bed, I just reread your book and I read the ending last night and I was sobbing. And then as I was going to bed, my dog climbed up on the pillow and sighed. And I immediately started crying again. And it just really put into perspective, I think about the day, the inevitable day when she will go. And it's interesting that I can start to think about her ending and, start to grieve for her. But I don't think about humans in my life that way. I'm not, grieving my father who's still here, but I look at my dog and I imagine life without her down the road and I start to cry. But they become members of our family.
They absolutely do. And I think the thing with pets that's unique is they're really the only relationship that we can see them through their entire lives. With our parents, we sort of expect them to predecease us. That's just part of the circle of life. And with our children, we expect them to outlive us. That's the unwritten deal, and why it's so painful and tragic when that doesn't happen. But with pets, we oftentimes get them very early in their lives, and we see them into old age, adulthood, then old age, and often until their deaths. And it's a very unique relationship, I think, and it's a real privilege to see something through their entire life and be witness to that. And very moving.
Oh, that was really beautifully put. Yeah. I want to talk about the magical realism in the book. You sort of dive into this when Ted sets out to kill the octopus, especially in the chapters when he and Lily head out to sea on the trawler. Mm-hmm. Tell us more about the boat scenes and why you chose to include that in this story. We've got questions from Jennifer Jones, she's from one of our Brooklyn chapters. She notes that most of the book was very realistic, and that their members saw their own relationship with their pets in the story, but it seemed like the section on the boat hunting the octopus went into more fantasy. Was there a reason for the seeming change in style for that section specifically?
Yeah, I do. Well, either love that section or they hate that section, and you guys are not shy about telling me. You know, I've had people come right up to me and be like, "Well, you ruined your book when you took it to sea."
Oh,
And, I always have to chuckle. But other people, it's their favorite part of the book, and it's very, you know, it's very divisive in that way. For me, it was very reflective of one, I think, oftentimes near the end, particularly with cancer patients, and this is it with humans as well as pets, that sometimes near the end there's a moment that whether it's a full remission or not quite a remission, but patient actually seems more lucid and better, and sometimes that's fleeting. But there's a moment sometimes where you think, oh, I'm getting into here. We actually could beat this thing. And oftentimes that's not the case, that it's fleeting, that it's, you know, it's some magical thinking in its own right. But, you know, I sort of wanted to reflect that a little bit to give Ted hope that maybe he was winning. But also, you know, in terms of Ted, I think he had to like fully retreat within himself. You know, as I said, talking about constructs that the brain can develop to protect itself. He fully retreated within himself before he could set himself in a new direction. And I sort of thought it was important to show how fully he's retreated from his actual life, to really land the emotion of seeing in that last section when he meets Byron that how far he's come to move forward.
that's great. Thank you so much for answering that. I also want to talk about the symbolism in the book too. There are several instances of it, each book section being likened to an octopus-related theme, amongst others, like the fisherman in his boat, O2. Why was it important to you to include so much symbolism in this story?
Yeah, a part of it was just a device as a writer. Once I came up with the idea of the octopus, I knew the book would have to be written 8 parts. And so this sounds kind of funny because the octopus is being invertebrates. But then suddenly the book had, I had 8 parts. Okay, well, I'm going to put each part in, we'll have an octopus theme. So ink, for instance, what can I put in there? Well, there's the bit about the tattoo. There's the Rorschach test. There's different, you know, so I could start figuring out the way the book would look based on having that symbolism. But also, you know, I was looking for a literary way to tell a tale. A lot of new stories to tell. There are only new ways to tell the same story. So this was hopefully a new way to visit these things. But you know, I leaned into the octopus. It was a surprising amount to say, you know, and I would keep discovering new things, like the infinity symbol, you know, is sort of an 8 on its side. It's happened that some of these things lent themselves really beautifully to where the story needed to go.
It's funny, I've seen a number of our members commenting and sharing photos of all the octopuses that they've been seeing this month since they started reading your book. Angie specifically says, I don't know if you can see her camera there. Yeah. She has a squishy octopus that her husband made, and it was the same day that she finished the book, and he didn't know she was reading the book. So yeah. Octopus is popping up everywhere.
It's amazing. They do pop up. now once you look for them, they are kind of everywhere right now. I do feel guilty about villainizing. They really are incredible creatures, and they're so smart. And in picking an octopus, I didn't realize like how perfect a foil this would be for Ted, because there are plenty of octopuses, not octopi. I had to look that up. Octopuses can learn to use tools and to play. So, you know, in terms of somebody to needle Ted and to really get under, and I thought there are some things that octopuses can do naturally that sort of lend themselves to, you know, a tormentor in a way. But they really are magnificent animals, and I hate to think that people will hate them just because of me.
It is what it is, you know. I don't think anybody hates the red ball now that you've written about the red ball, but we did have members discussing that too, and specifically Ted's dream in which he and Lily were on the boat and they were being pelted and kind of devoured by the red balls raining from the sky. So we know that the red ball was Lily's favorite toy, but what is the significance of Lily being bombarded with all the red balls on the ship? That question is from Hillary from Baltimore.
That is a good question, and apparently I need to go back and read my own book, which I haven't done in a long time. I went and talked to some high school students last year, and they said they wanted to try to stump the author, and they pulled trivia questions from the book, and I did pretty well, but they did. Red ball, I just think it so perfectly symbolizes the chase. You know, that life is sort of an adventure, and following that ball will sort of, you know, it's always leading you on a fresh adventure. All those balls from the sky, though, I just think it just sort of led into sort of Ted's fears about maybe he put all his in one relationship, and how now losing that soul feels very sort of crushing, suffocating, the way you would under a pile of red balls.
Yeah, that was the thought, or the question from the group was the intention of the scene to show how something that you love so much can actually destroy you. That's so very interesting. I have a note here from Melanie. I've lost it. Pardon me. She wants to know about Byron. Are you and Byron still together?
So yeah, Byron are still together. Byron, that was his name. That is my boyfriend's name. He is the one who encouraged me to write it as a book, and we are still together. It'll be 5 years this summer. And it's the only name I didn't change in the book. And we had a long conversation about that because I had changed all the other, well, I do actually have a friend named Trent. Friend, anything other than Trent, then we're through. So that name is inspired by a real friend of mine. But the only other actual name that I kept the same, and it was only because I loved that Lord Byron poem so much, and I thought that there was sort of lovely, it was just sort of kismet that he was named Byron. It was hard to lose. I tried other things, you know, Arthur being a shining knight, perhaps, but it just, there was something poetic and romantic about the name Byron that was hard to lose. The flip side of that is there in the back of the paperback, I think there's a guide for book clubs with some suggested questions. And one of them is, what do you think of the Byron character? Do you think he and the narrator have a future together? And all I could think of was, when I first read them, oh no, people in book clubs everywhere are going to be weighing in on my relationship. But yeah, Byron and I are together.
It's true. Tell us, does he actually speak like Lily did in the book, though?
He does. That's the weird thing. I thought long and hard about how to bring this to a close, and it seemed I worried at the beginning too tidy, but it is actually what happened. And he does speak, maybe not in the same way as in the book, but there is an enthusiasm to which he embraces life that comes through sometimes. And yes, to do this in a similar. He has a puppyish energy.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Just going back a little bit to what you were saying about Trent also being a person in your life, Katie notes that she really loved that Ted's friend Trent dropped everything to be with him when Lily died. And she thought that it was telling that Ted had held on to a couple close relationships with his friend and his sister Meredith, despite closing himself off from others. So can you talk about the importance of true friends and family?
I've had friends of mine say, "Oh, I should have been more sensitive during this time. I didn't realize, when the actual Lily had passed, and I needed to tell everyone, no, you were there, you were wonderful. It's just not everyone made the book for this reason I talked about earlier. Sort of, there's a spareness and simplicity to the book that I really was pushing for, and I think comes through in the final version. But family is very important to me. I love the mother character in this. People think, oh, I've had people make comments about the mother, but I really think it's lovely, their relationship as well. And she's one of my favorites in the book. My own mother had a little issue with it. It's not exactly her, but she's come around, and now she always goes into bookstores wherever she is and faces out the book front so people can see it from shelves, and says loudly how they don't have enough copies in stock. But yeah, I think there are people who know us, who they write from, and I think that these are very special relationships, and these are, I sort of wanted to balance what I said about dogs, or some of dogs as witnesses, or dogs who see us in all of our private moments, that can stitch the gaps between what we let other people see. But there are certain people that, that we can't hide from, and it's oftentimes family, and a few friends. And the dogs, as wonderful as they are not substitutes for these human relationships.
That is very true. We have another note from Melanie here, just a compliment on how the euthanasia scene was written. That note is from their chapter. I found that as well myself, having gone through a couple euthanasias with family pets, and I think you wrote about it really well in a way that was realistic and honest and raw, and kind of doesn't really glamorize it, gets to the nitty gritty. And you mentioned the flyers that Ted has to deal with after. It's a tough thing, and we appreciate how you covered that and how you spoke about that.
Yeah, there's no whitewashing that. In fact, that was a very interesting section, and very difficult section to write. And the way that I got through it was thinking of myself more as a journalist, like almost taking my creative writer hat off. Okay, no more isms, no more. This is the moment where Ted sort of realizes, okay, enough hiding from the truth. And the only way to write that was just as simple, unornamented, not florid, no floral language, just step by step. We're back in reality now, and it is what it is. It's an interesting thing to witness, as I say, and those of us who are listening, who've been through it, and it's a lot of us. it's brave and it's compassionate. And, you know, it's very, very sad. Now, I wrote it as I remembered at the time. And now this is years ago, so memory starts to fade. But the one thing that sticks with me from that experience is I do remember sitting in the room afterwards thinking, and I can't remember if it's in the book or not. I think it's in the book, but they left me alone in the room with Lily, and they closed the door. And I remember having this weird thought, like, okay, how long do I sit here? How long is the right amount of time to sit here that demonstrates the importance of this relationship? I felt performative about it in a weird way. Like I wanted others to know that this was a deep loss to me. So I was like, okay, well, what is the right amount of time for that? And then worried about being in there for too long, and then being like, oh my God, we got to get the guy and out of here. But isn't that funny that that's what sticks in my mind now? But I haven't, to be honest, I haven't gone back and reread that section. It's difficult for me to do. But yeah, I think it's that sort of hour by hour documentation. I just sort of, as I said, felt a little more journalistic about writing that section than anything else.
And you, like you said, in your real experience, you did include that in the book of how long is the right amount of time, and sort of almost making a show of it by staying in there the right amount of time. Melanie notes that her background is in animal health care, and from the other side of things, what the person actually going through thinks and sees and feels when they get home was very touching and absolutely beautifully written. So kudos there.
Oh, thank you. The animal care professionals are really remarkable people. The people who were there that day, I remember seamlessly were there. They did their job. They were not uncompassionate, but they didn't insert themselves more than they need to be. It was almost like, you know, they were ghosts in a strange sort of way. And but anyway, people who do that, it's remarkable, and we're very appreciative of them.
Totally. Let's transition over to a little bit of a lighter topic. Thank you for diving and getting back in the nitty-gritty there with us. And not to change the subject from Lily, but to talk about another special dog that is in your life right now. You have a rescue named Tilda. What can you share with us about Tilda?
I do. Rescue. She was here a second ago. I'll grab her in a minute. But okay. You know, and people ask me, you know, will there be a book about Tilda? And I'm not sure there will be. But if there is, it'll be very different than Lily, because Tilda was found living on the streets of Los Angeles, and shot her up pretty good with a BB gun, which enrages me. But she lost an eye. She had broken ribs when she was found. So she is completely mute. She doesn't speak. Even to this day, she doesn't speak. So, you know, having conversations like I did with Lily, it's a very different relationship that we have. But in some ways, you know, I've thought about Tilda because it's a bookend to Lily's story, which with Tilda, it was finding a dog near death and bringing her back to life because she's happy and nothing but spoiled now. So I thought that's sort of a nice bookend with Lily.
That's really beautiful. I hope you guys are all happy and healthy. Tell us what else is happening in your life. What's coming up for you? You have a new book in the works out next year. Tell us about The Editor.
Next year, yeah. In fact, I'm turning in the final manuscript on Friday. It'll be taken away from Tinker Forever. But I'm very, very excited about this one. It's not about a dog. Maybe book 3, but this is and I'm really excited about it. It's called The Editor, and it will be out in early. I don't have an exact date February of next year. And for anyone who's interested, you can follow me online anywhere, and I'll be posting lots of updates to win copies and all sorts of fun stuff. So that's exciting. And then this hasn't been announced publicly yet, but so I'll give you the scoop. There is a Lily film in the works, and it is going to be a big live action adaptation, much in the way Life of Pi was done, and that's coming from Amazon Studios. So I'm very excited about that.
That is super exciting. That is one of the questions we always ask, because everyone wants to know, is there going to be a film adaptation? So that's super exciting. Can't wait to see more about that in the future. One thing I forgot
to... a little bit, 'cause I will say that when I decided to write Lily as a novel, to take off my screenwriter hat entirely, and I sort of, writing, when you write for film, everything has to be external. It has to be, you have to show through action or dialogue, so that people can see what's happening. And with writing this novel, it's very internal. It all takes place, basically inside Ted's head. And I did all sorts of things. I was like, I can't do this with the screenplay. So octopus on dog's head, or big expensive battle at sea. Sure, I just typed away. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes to screen, because I really gave them a challenge.
Well, it's very exciting. We can't see it. Hopefully we're all invited to the premiere, as Angie said.
Yes.
We have one more question.
70,000 best friends from...
Yeah, no doubt. In a dog-friendly theater, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
We have one more question from Corey, asking about your tattoo and your Lily tattoo. So that might not be something that everyone knows. It's not Lily standing on the octopus's head as it is in the book. What can you tell us about the real Lily tattoo you have?
I do. I have a real Lily tattoo, saying red ball. And this was inspired by an illustration that was on the cover of the book. If you took off the dust jacket on the actual cover of the book, were these little pencil drawings that I thought were so stunningly beautiful. It was based off one of those. So that's, I have that now, Lily chasing red ball forever. So that's very meaningful to me. The tattoo that was in the book, I did not have that. That was a fabrication of mine that sort of fit the, everyone wanted to see the tattoo, when I was on book tour and whatnot, it was like, can we see the tattoo? Can we see the tattoo? I was like, it is a novel. Not everything's as it seems, but I'm very happy with this Lily one.
Yeah, that is great. And I love that it is taken from artwork that's included on one of your books. That's really cool.
One of the great joys is Lily's now been translated in, I think it's 20 languages. So she's all around the world. So I'll get emails from people in South Africa and South America, Brazil, that are so touching to me, because for this little girl with ridiculously short legs, I love thinking of her off on this adventure, these incredible adventures all around the globe. So it tickles me.
Oh. Well, it has been a pleasure spending this month reading your book for the second time now. It is truly a touching story. I think you really, encapsulate what it is to be, a pet companion, to have a dog companion in your life. You capture all of it, from the little things like putting on any jacket and finding a dog poop bag in the pocket, or getting an extra tub of ice cream at the grocery store because you know that your dog's going to enjoy it just as much as you are. It's these little things, and it's the bigger things, but I think you really encapsulated all of it, and the way that we may first take in a dog as a pet, but they quickly become our companions and part of our families. So thank you for sharing your story about Lily with the world.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone who has embraced Lily It's beautiful. The interesting thing about writing a book like this is that you just don't know whether the whole time you're working on that it's such a solitary occupation, that you don't know that if the story that you're working on will have the power to connect in any meaningful way. And so I'm so thrilled that readers have embraced really what this book and me in the way that they have. It means so much. So thank you.
Well, we are so thrilled to have read it. We're super excited to have chatted with you tonight. Thank you so much for your time. We can't wait for the adaptation that's coming up, and we also can't wait for future works from you. So thank you so much for joining us, Steven, for giving us a great month and a great piece of literature to read and enjoy. Thank you for everything.
It's been my pleasure very much. Thank you. I tuned in.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. Thank you to Steven. We wish you all a good night.
Thank you.